guys, you are in for a treat today. I'm here with none other than Mr. Duff Rubin. He is the Florida president for Coldwell BANKER. Duff, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. That's great.
I'm excited. I wanted to pick his brain and ask some of the standard questions that are floating about, the real estate ether. And first off, tell us what your role is as Florida president.
So I'm the president of Coldwell BANKER Florida, which is the largest operation for Coldwell BANKER in the world. We have 7,700 agents in 80 offices. We have 5 regions, so we go from the Panhandle all the way through Tampa, down through Sarasota, Naples, all the way to Miami, all the way up through Orlando. So we cover the state pretty well.
It's a vast territory. Florida is very large, and you're hailing from Canada.
I was born and raised in Canada, played hockey like every Canadian. I wanted to be a professional hockey player. I was fortunate enough that my grandparents were both in real estate, and I was brought up in the real estate world. And when I moved to Florida in '98, I got into commercial real estate. That was the way I got introduced to real estate.
And what number commercial agent were you in the country?
I was the #1 agent in 2010 for Coldwell BANKER.
That's impressive.
Yeah, well, you know what? I was fortunate. I had some good contacts, and because I grew up in Canada and I knew a lot of people who were looking to invest in Florida, commercial real estate's actually pretty hot in Florida, as much as we talk about residential. There are a lot of people who want to own commercial real estate in Florida because there's no state income tax. So that makes the return even better.
Isn't that a beautiful thing?
It's a beautiful thing.
I speak about that all the time to people. Like, when you list the benefits, besides the sun and the beaches, I mean, there's so many other benefits. But because we're in the beginning of February here and there's something going on the border with the truckers, how do you feel about that? How do you think that might impact Florida real estate?
Well, when I see what's going on with COVID, and it's been certainly one of the most challenging times in our history as a human race, I do see, the silver lining has been for the Florida real estate world because we benefited from some of the problems that have occurred across the world, including Canada, who happens to be our biggest buyers. If you look at foreign buyers, Canada represents the #1 buyer in Florida from out of country. And when you see them having trouble with COVID and locking their people down, it makes them flee and they run here and they're looking to be here more full time than maybe just the snowbirds who are coming just for 6 months.
I mean, and with everything that's going on with the Canadian truckers and now the U.S. truckers and supply and demand shortages already, I mean, do you think that's going to stop people from coming down and buying here? Or,
well,
I have my opinions, but
I do think demand is not going to slow anytime soon. They just opened air travel from most of Europe and Asia, all parts of the world. There's still some countries that are a little more restricted, including Canada. But I will say I think demand is not going to slow, at least for the next 18 months to 2 years. The problem is inventory.
That was my next question. Now, how do we solve this problem here? I mean, that's kind of an everyday question for us on the team, and we're just trying to get the listings, and thankfully we have a nice one right now. We've got 2 coming up, so we're excited about it. And any price range too. We don't care. I mean, I love the luxury, but this is a home for people, and it's whether you're a snowbird or not, it's a home for someone, and so there's still that human element, and so I don't know, tell me.
So I will say one of the other trends that we see in real estate for Florida buyers is with the new trend of remote work, a lot more people are moving here for full-time instead of just for the winter because they're able to work remotely. And I think that's driving a lot of the demand from out of state because a lot of people are saying, hey, if I have to work remote, where would I rather be? Florida, New York, Chicago, all parts north where it's winter right now and they're getting record-breaking snow. So I do think that's going to continue to help us as more people work remotely. And that's going to go beyond COVID in the next year or 2. But I do think at the end of the day, how do we get more listings? Kate Rossi, who's the champion of listings, and she teaches prospecting better than I can. But I will tell you, what she's teaching us all to do is you need to go back to all your customers that you sold homes to. And I'm a good example because I was telling you earlier, I bought my house 6 months ago.
Yeah, just tell me the story. Listen to this.
And while I bought it during the pandemic, it was new construction. It wasn't completed until late 2021. I put it on the market the day I closed. because I knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to capitalize on a market that's appreciating at numbers we haven't seen.
Double digits.
Double digits.
Even 9%. Okay, double digits. I've never seen that, and I've been doing this 20 years, right? We've been in the for a
25
while.
years.
Never seen that.
Never seen it. So I tell everybody this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and if you had a chance to make that kind of money in such a short period of time, where else are you going to be able to do that? Not at your job. Not even if you have a great bonus or your stock market, which we've seen go up and down the last few months. But I will tell you, real estate is probably the biggest investment most people have in their portfolio. And if you could capitalize and make that kind of money, now the next question that you ask is, where do you go?
Exactly. That was yes, because we are on the ground, okay, and we're trying to help offset this insatiable demand, right? And then they're saying, well, where am I going to go? Should I rent? Should I buy? And I know we just talked about it, but tell our audience what you have to say about that.
So people ask me, and I say, fortunately for me, or not fortunately, I don't have a family to disrupt, so I don't have to speak to my partner, my wife, my children, and say, we're moving. There's no school and any kind of considerations I have to give it. But to me, if you're going to sell at the height of the market, you probably want to be careful not to also buy at the height of the market. So I think renting is a good alternative for some. But the other thing is, a lot of our clients in Florida happen to have 2 homes, or 3 or 4 or 5, and are able to actually go move to another place in the country or in parts of the world. They may go back to Canada.
To rent, maybe for a year? Is that what
I
you're
think
saying?
renting for a year and watch.
The rental market though is
It's
really,
insane.
really tight and really, really high in terms of price. So that just feeds into this battle, right? That what do we do? And of course, if you have kids, like to your point, if you have kids, it makes it exponentially harder to decide probably.
Well, and I think what's making the rental market so hard is there's more and more investors doing Airbnb and doing all these single-family home rentals. It's not just the multi-family apartments. There are so many rental properties out there, but they're getting swooped up and they're getting weekly and monthly rentals. But I do think it's a challenge for everybody. But like I said, most people in Florida, or a lot of people in Florida, do happen to have second homes. And some of them are just saying, you know what, I'm going to go back to my other home and cash in Florida while the market's hot. And maybe in their other parts of the country where it's not as hot, maybe live there for a year or 2 and wait, and maybe spend a week or 2 in Florida in a hotel or a rental.
It's a great problem to have, right? Oh, I can go to my other home. So then we have this whole other dynamic that kind of fits in, which is the interest rates, right? Of course, well, we already saw the 1 hike, and we'd be thinking that there's maybe a couple more. How do you think that feeds into our...
Love that question.
Yeah.
Because I did close on my house in 2 3/4 on a jumbo loan, which is practically free money. I remember getting a mortgage 10 years ago, and I was at 4 or 5, 6%, and the difference in my monthly payments is amazing. So I do think there are going to be some buyers that are probably going to get more aggressive in their purchasing, and they may reach a little harder before the rates start going up, because they're going to lose purchasing power when the rates go up. And then you have some sellers like me who are probably going to say, you know, the higher the rates go, the less people are going to be willing to reach.
Right.
So it may bring down some of these sellers' expectations.
Speaking of our awesome sellers, where do you see that some of these sellers saying, hey, I can sell this myself? Like the demand is so high. What do you say to those sellers?
You know, that's a great question. You know, this FISBO or whatever.
Question.
Yeah, these FISBOs and these people who think it's so much easier. All the realtors are doing is putting it on the MLS, and they're getting multiple offers. They're not even having to do open houses anymore because there's so much demand. You know what? At the end of the day, I learned one thing early in this real estate world. The more people that see your house, the more exposure you give to any listing, the better chance you have of getting a higher price. And Florida, which really depends on out-of-state and out-of-country buyers, you can't do that when you're a for sale by owner. Putting a for sale by owner sign in your
Or
property.
they say Zillow. What do you say? I mean,
Yeah, Zillow, I think people have lost trust in Zillow, and I think a lot of people are turned off. His estimates have never really been good for sellers. I think most sellers realize Zillow's not doing them any favors.
And how about them buying all these properties and then
And now they're out of the business and their stock is tanking. You know what? I don't like to speak badly of our competitors or people because
Not our competitors.
well, they're trying to get into the brokerage business, so they're going to try to do what we do, but they're not going to succeed because at the end of the day, it still comes down to real estate agents and relationships. This business is a relationship business. Kate Rossi will tell you it's a nose-to-nose, toes-to-toes business. And at the end of the day, it's the relationships that our agents have with other realtors and their previous clients that's going to dictate the price.
And you keep speaking about this Kate woman. She's going to be on the show too. You're going to meet. She's a very dynamic woman, as are you, a dynamic guy. So we're going to have her on the show. All right, so the other thing is, I'm sure you saw it in, I don't know what publication it was, but it's not a shock anyway, that Sarasota and Tampa were the top 2 cities for relocation in the U.S. Okay, top 2, both in Florida. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you know, people ask me that because I live on the East Coast, and you know, I've seen it's an interesting pattern. I've seen a lot of migration from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I think a lot of it's affordability, a lot of it's seasonality. I don't think there's as much seasonality, meaning, you know, a lot of the snowbirds and a lot of the people who go to Miami or on the East Coast, South Florida, are there only for the winter, and the price has gotten astronomical on the East Coast.
True.
I think Tampa
is
ridiculous, the pricing. I think Tampa and Sarasota, the west coast of Florida, people are starting to appreciate the golf like I do, the beaches.
Are you going to come on this side now?
I was in St. Pete last night. I spent a year in Sarasota, but I do think there's a lot more work to be found in Tampa and Sarasota than there used to be. There's a lot of companies moving to this side, and I think it's just, you know, it's an evolution of what's going on in Florida. People are moving where it's more affordable, and they realize what I always tell people: it's the same weather, it's the same state income tax, whether you live in Miami or you live in Sarasota or Tampa. So the benefits that exist that people used to think were sort of South Florida, to me, I think they're starting to realize. And let's not forget, Tampa, they call it Champion Bay because they won the Super Bowl last year, they won the Stanley Cup. There's a lot of great sports, there's a lot of great culture, there's great education, there's universities on this side. I think the west coast of Florida is being found and discovered for the first time in probably 10, 15 years.
I've always said, and we've talked about this, that Sarasota has been undervalued for some time, and maybe it took this pandemic to kind of realize that, you know, the public realize that. But we're also seeing like our always feeder markets that we've always had, I should say, from like Ohio and Chicago and stuff like that. But now we're seeing people from California in droves. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't learn that until I lived in Sarasota last year, that the reason why the Northeast goes to South Florida is because of 95. And people follow the patterns of the highway. And when I moved over to Sarasota and I learned a lot about Naples and the West Coast, it's 75. So when you look at the 75 corridor and you go up to Ohio, Kentucky, and you go to Michigan, and you go to Illinois, that's what feeds typically Naples to Sarasota and Tampa. And then I was in the Panhandle last week, and they get Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Louisiana. But to your point about California, for many years California was not in the top 10 in feeder markets for Florida. And in the last 2 years, it's moved up into the top 5.
It's exploded. I mean, we talk to people.
And Washington State also.
Yeah, well,
It's not only, it's the whole west coast of the United States.
and they're moving to Texas.
They're moving to Texas and they're moving to Florida.
Arizona,
They used to move
maybe.
to Arizona. They're coming here. And people ask me, why do I think it is? And I said, you know, it's not only the taxes, because the taxes have been in play for many years. That's not a new phenomenon. There's been some unrest in parts of the country. There's been some political changes. And there are a lot of people that are moving to Florida for more than just the taxes and weather. And it's a lifestyle change.
Saying it without saying it, you know?
Well, and I think it's also affordability. California is not a very affordable place to live from a tax and real estate.
I have friends that are spending $4,500 a month to rent a place, and now that's going up, and now we're starting to see some of that here in similar types of rental properties, and it's just catching up, I guess.
You know, it's funny you say that because I used to always hear New Yorkers on the East Coast talk about how cheap it was to live in Florida compared to New York, Manhattan. Now you're hearing that same analogy about California, San Francisco, LA. Like if you lived in some of those cities, it is so expensive. And to come to Florida and have a pool in your backyard.
Everything looks so inexpensive, right?
Well, and if you're gonna get stuck homeschooling or locked into your house because of a pandemic, you want a pool, you want an outdoor backyard.
Things to do.
And you have good weather.
Exactly. Okay, so we're gonna end this with maybe a couple pieces of advice for buyers and then advice for sellers. We'll start with the buyers.
So the first thing I would tell any buyer is work with a great real estate agent. And the reason I say that is people think negotiation comes easy. People think that they can probably do it themselves and they bought other things like cars or other things without help. I will tell you, when you look at making the biggest investment of your life, use the experts, use a realtor. You're not paying for them. The seller is paying for your agent. In what other world can you say that somebody else is paying for your advisor to help you buy something from them? That's something that people don't think about. But I do think the negotiation, also the inspections, the credits, some of the things you should be looking at. In a market as we're in now that is so hot, there are a lot of sellers that are trying to cut corners. And whether it's missing permits or problems with title, getting a good mortgage, knowing who to use as a mortgage company, that's everything you should depend on with your broker, because they're going to point you in the right direction. And the truth is, they're going to make the best experience of your life, or the most important purchase of your life, the best experience ever.
And to your point about the title issue, we had one of our referral partners came across a transaction that had to delay the closing, and she alerted us right from the get-go. And sometimes we work with not the best on the other side, I guess, without being too brash. But she brought it up from the get-go, and now look, they've got an extended closing. I mean, they're going to figure it out. But to that point, I mean, it's so much better and so much
Permits.
smoother to work with a long-time expert in that field.
Well, and you also know what you should be looking for in terms of an inspection and in terms of what kind of credits or repairs should be done by the seller. What's your responsibility? What's their responsibility? I just think you need the advice. Like I said, if the seller's going to pay for your broker, why wouldn't you have a broker?
You don't want to lose your escrow, right? That's another hot thing that comes up.
You're 100%
Your
right.
money's literally on the line, so.
Use an agent when you're a buyer. On the seller's side, it's a little different. Because like I said, I do think when you work with a company like Coldwell BANKER, you're guaranteed you're going to get global exposure on your property. And I love when sellers or agents come to me and say, oh, they want to do an off-market deal, or they want to give me a pocket listing. And I say, what does that mean? And they go, well, they don't want to put it on the market. They don't want their friends to know they're selling their house. And I was in commercial where, quite frankly, you never see a for sale sign in front of a shopping center.
There's a lot more discretion with that. If it's a medical office or whatever, yeah.
But, the reality is in what world would it make sense for a seller to want to keep it a secret that they're selling their house? And to do an off-market deal or to do a pocket listing, you're basically hurting yourself, because that person who just got off a plane at SRQ or Tampa or Miami, who's driving around with a broker, and they don't know that your house is on the market because it's not on the MLS and there's no for sale sign, then you might miss that one person who just flew in for the weekend to come see a house. So do yourself a favor as a seller, use an agent. It'll all come out of the price. So whatever you think you're saving by not paying a broker, you're going to get back twice as much in the selling price. That's been proven.
Can you come with me on our next appointment? That'd be great.
Well, I guess the biggest lesson I think I've learned, and being a seller with an overpriced listing, as Kate would tell me, anything that doesn't sell in the first 30 days is probably overpriced.
In this market, right?
In this market, that's the one thing sellers, I think, have to come to a reality with, is that if it's not selling, there's only one reason. Only one. Now, obviously there are issues with permits and title and some defects with the house.
But barring that.
Barring that it doesn't need a new roof.
It's still price driven in this market even.
Everything is price driven. And I will tell you, I think the old cliche is if it doesn't sell in 30 days, it's overpriced, is not really a cliche. This market is proving that. And I got to tell you, we're very fortunate to have such a great market.
We are. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This is great.